But Admiral, before you go, as mentioned at the top of the show, it is the anniversary, 75th anniversary of an organization you once led, NATO. It's being marked by foreign ministers today in Brussels. Heads of state will do so in Washington this summer. We just want to get your thoughts about the legacy of the organization and why now, perhaps more than ever, it's so vitally needed.
Yeah, what a wonderful question for a former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. I'm proud to answer it, Jonathan. Think of NATO like a computer program. NATO 1.0 was the Cold War NATO of the U.S. versus the Soviet Union. We needed those NATO allies to stand toe-to-toe with the Soviet Union. NATO 2.0 emerges after the 9/11 attacks. The United States was attacked, and all of our NATO allies, every nation, came with us to Afghanistan to avenge that. And NATO 3.0 is what we see today. Brought on by Vladimir Putin, now strengthened by the addition of Sweden and Finland to the north. Together, these 32 nations are well over half of the world's gross domestic product. They have 3 million troops under arms, almost all volunteers, 15,000 combat aircraft. It's an extraordinary alliance. It's standing up to Vladimir Putin. And we watched a few moments ago, and I think we were all moved by Martin Luther King's speech. It was extraordinary. There's another extraordinary speech in the middle of all this. It's Ronald Reagan. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. What gave Reagan the strength to make that speech? The answer is NATO. Happy birthday, NATO.
Well, and Admiral, I want to put this map up again. And of course, you talked about how the addition of Sweden and Finland turned the Baltic Sea into the Baltic Lake. But we've heard whining. I'm so sick and tired of Donald Trump and his allies trashing the United States, trashing the West, saying that we've seen our best days, that it can only be great again if he's there. America is great. America has been great. America will be great. Look at that map of NATO. And on that map, that is the West. That is the West that's supposedly been in retreat. If you and I went back to 1989 and somebody showed us this map and said, this is what NATO's going to look like in 30, we'd tell them they're out of their mind. And it's not just the strongest military alliance in world history. Admiral, I'm so glad you brought up the GDP, because I hear all this whining about America failing, America falling, the Europeans being wimps. You combine America's GDP with the EU's GDP, and like you said, in that NATO alliance right there, we have over half of the entire globe's GDP. Well over 50, 60 trillion dollars to Russia's $1.3 trillion. It's not even close. China, 16, 17 trillion dollars, and they're struggling to avoid the lost decade that the Japanese had in the 1990s. Talk about the strength of America, the strength of the West, and the strength of NATO today. Stronger than ever.
Stronger together is how we would phrase that. And it is a remarkable economic coalition, but militarily, United States obviously has the largest defense budget in the world. The second largest defense budget in the world collectively, when you add it up, is the budget of all those European allies. We do laps around the size or scale of both China and Russia combined. And oh, by the way, in Asia, the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Australians, the Kiwis of New Zealand, the Singaporeans, the Filipinos, all want to work with NATO together. So it's even beyond the European piece of this. It's really a global coalition which stands for democracy and liberty, and collectively is so strong together against these authoritarian regimes. Today, 75th anniversary, again, happy birthday, NATO.
Mika, together, we cannot fail.
Right.
Which is why Donald Trump wants to break NATO into a million pieces. because that's what Vladimir Putin wants.
It's for anyone with eyes to see. Harry Truman was president, of course, when this alliance was put together. And coming up, the grandson of Harry Truman will be on the show to talk about NATO 75 years later. Retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis, thank you very much for being on this morning.